today. I want to thank you for joining us for our PPP webinar. I hope you'll find that the information presented today is exactly what you need to help you with your PPP process. I would like to introduce to you first Camille Shaw, who's going to get us started today with some information about the SCMBDA. Camille?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's PPP workshop. My name is Camille Shaw, and I am the project director of the South Carolina MBDA Business Center, which is operated by DITSA Inc. Before we begin, let me give you a quick overview of our center. The South Carolina MBDA Business Center is funded by the U.S. Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency. Our center works with minority businesses throughout the states of South Carolina and North Carolina to help them scale up and build capacity. We serve as strategic consultants to help small businesses grow to the next level, as well as meet the challenges of today's changing business climate. Last year, we assisted our businesses with obtaining over $33 million in contracts and over $53 million in financing. Prior to the pandemic, there were over 243,000 minority-owned businesses in the state of South Carolina and North Carolina. We know that several of the self-employed businesses or persons that receive 1099s were left out of the first round of the PPP CARES funding. We understand that there were various challenges with minority businesses that prevented them from accessing PPP fundings last year. So that brings us back to why we're here today. We understand that many of you may have closed during the spring due to business restrictions or shutdowns. That is why we made this effort today to make sure that you have the support that you need, the information that you need, so that all eligible businesses may obtain PPP funding for the overall sustainability of your business, jobs, and the economy. After this webinar, our center will offer free one-on-one assistance to you to help you determine if you qualify for PPP. We are available to speak with you about loan forgiveness and to help you package your PPP application. And again, this is at no cost to you, thanks to the center as well as our partners. So stay tuned to the end of this webinar so that you can receive the information that you need in order to book an appointment with us. But before we begin, I would like to thank our partners to make that helped us to make this possible today. Our partners include the South Carolina Department of Commerce, the City of Columbia, Office of Business Opportunity, East Cooper Financial Services and Tax and Accounting Services, Optus Bank, and Nixon Pruitt. So thank you again for joining us. We hope that this workshop will be beneficial to you. At this time, I would like to turn the program back over to our moderator, Ms. Chiquita Jones, so that she can proceed with the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. Again, my name is Chiquita Jones, and I'll be serving as your moderator. I'm going to do my best to keep things moving, making sure that we've covered all the high points and ultimately making sure that we've addressed all of your questions. Also, you may hear our presenters give some of the same information, and that's because they want to be sure you understand how important this information is. During the registration process, you were asked if you had a question that you wanted our presenters to address. Those questions were forwarded in advance to our presenters for review. So your question may very well be answered during the course of the webinar. If you did submit a question in advance and it was not addressed during the webinar, or if you just have a question in general, please submit it through the question and answer box at any time during the presentation, and we will make sure that it's addressed at the end of the session today. You will also be given information where you can call, as Camille indicated, to get your questions answered or to make an appointment to receive one-on-one assistance at absolutely no cost to you. Periodically during the presentation, we'll be asking a few poll questions just to keep things interactive and to keep you engaged. This will give our presenters a better idea of exactly where you're at with your PPP understanding. And now I'd like to take a moment to introduce today's presenters. David Robinson. David is an attorney with the law firm Nexon Pruitt in the Raleigh, North Carolina office. Nexon Pruitt has offices in North and South Carolina, Texas, and they have relationships in 75 of the major commercial centers of the world. For many years, David focused on the global commercial marketplace with its rapidly growing complexity. He has assisted clients in cross-border transactions around the world. Since the onset of the COVID-19 global pandemic, David has been working with clients on the Paycheck Protection Program. He has a long history of civic, professional, and international organization memberships that have helped define his motto that everything is global. Welcome, David. Next, Mr. Harold Singletary is an entrepreneur with over 20 years of tax and financial expertise. He is the owner of the accounting solution business firm East Cooper Financial Services, LLC. Since the CARES Act was introduced in 2020, Harold has been working with small and minority businesses in the Charleston area with PPP. He has progressive experience developing and implementing financial systems, strategies, as well as processes and controls that significantly improve profit and loss scenarios. Thank you for joining us today, Harold. And we have Dr. Brenda B. Brannick, who is the PPP coordinator for Optus Bank and the owner operator of B. Brannick Coaching and Consulting. She has been employed in the banking and insurance industries for over 30 years and has held numerous leadership and management positions, as well as serving on many nonprofit boards. Dr. Brannick has been instrumental in securing funding, recruiting board members, planning, coordinating, and implementing workshops that enhanced board member knowledge of nonprofits and the community at large, and working to strengthen partnerships and programs. Thank you all so much for joining us. And now let's get started with our first presenter, David Robinson with Nexon Pruitt. David?
Chiquita, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank MBDA for sponsoring such a valuable program. So first, a disclaimer. This is the federal government for almost a year building the airplane while they're flying it. All right. So the CARES Act and the PPP program are brand new programs. And to some extent, we've gotten really good guidance over the last couple of months. But again, your knowledge of the program must be current. This disclaimer is very important. What we're talking about today may not be fully accurate next week because the government, again, the landscape keeps changing. Please, you heard Ms. Shaw, make use of the MBDA folks. Also, East Cooper and Optus Bank, great resources on this call. Please make sure that your information is current at all times. If you want to do some of your own research, the overview of the PPP program is available at sba.gov. That's the Small Business Administration. Or if you want a deeper dive, I've found that the Treasury website. So if you just Google Treasury PPP, you'll pull up the Treasury Department, and they have all of the regulations if you want to do a little bit of a deeper dive. But let's proceed. Next slide. So big news at the end of 2020. You may have seen the news last year on and off, the PPP program ran out of money, or there was news stories that it was going to run out of money. Big news at the end of last year. Not only have they refunded the program and that there is money to be loaned to you all, they have actually set aside pots of that money targeted to many of you, I think, on this program, the small businesses. So not less than 15 billion for loans by community development financial institutions, smaller lenders. Very small businesses have a carve out for up to $15 billion, not less than $35 billion for loans to qualifying businesses who haven't been involved in the PPP program before. If you haven't done this yet, you are not out of luck. There is money available to you for a first draw. Now, if you have participated in the program before, there is actually, and you've spent that first draw money appropriately, you may be eligible for a second draw PPP loan, and they've set aside not less than $25 billion to small qualifying businesses for these second draw loans. Next slide. The legislation also expanded the eligibility, the categories of companies and businesses that are eligible for the PPP program. So a 501c6 organization is now eligible. That's maybe a chamber of commerce, professional associations, business leagues. A particular group of companies or businesses called destination marketing organizations. You've got housing cooperatives. If you're in the business of publishing a newspaper or running a radio or TV station, you are now eligible for the PPP program. Now, this is in addition to the types of businesses that were eligible all along under the CARES Act that was passed last year. Let's go ahead and go to our first poll question, please, Chiquita.
If you would just take a moment to answer this poll question, please. I just started a new business this year and could use some help. I can apply for a loan. True or false? All right, about 63% of you answered false, and that is correct. David?
Okay, so yes, the answer is false. Just because there's new funding for the program doesn't alter the fact that there is a certain requirements under the CARES Act in 2020, one of which is that you had to have been in business on or before February 15, 2020 to be eligible for the PPP program. Next slide. However, don't tune out. If you were not in business at that time, there are, again, other resources you should be examining to assist your business during this pandemic. Again, the PPP program is for folks that are having issues due to the coronavirus pandemic. There are other resources available. But before we get to that, let's talk about these restrictions on this slide just really quickly. Again, you had to have been in operation on or before February 15 of last year. The new legislation has a new program called the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant Program. You'll know if you are eligible for that. It's a smaller subset of businesses, and you just need to weigh whether you're going to participate in that grant program or in the PPP program. Your financial advisors can assist with that. And again, publicly traded companies got a lot of bad press last year, for some of which participated in the PPP program, and they are now excluded from the program. Next slide. A certain number of businesses have also been ineligible for SBA loans, and those businesses mostly continue to be ineligible for the PPP program. Again, the PPP program is a subset of the 7A lending program that the SBA has done for many years. So certain private clubs are in a laundry list under 13 CFR 120-110 of businesses that are ineligible in general for SBA loans. The one, I'm not going to go through the list, but the one that I will note up front at the top of the list is nonprofit businesses. The CARES Act specifically took nonprofit businesses out of that ineligible category and made them eligible for the PPP program. Pyramid sales, gambling, folks that are incarcerated. You shouldn't just fill out the paperwork, right? You ought to be talking to your lender about this. And if you have any questions with respect to your eligibility, you need to make sure you get those questions answered up front. There's a general prohibition on political or lobbying activities. The new legislation, we're having a bit of a trade dispute over the years with China. So there are some restrictions on US businesses doing business in China. And I won't go into details, but the Foreign Agents Registration Act as well renders certain businesses ineligible. Next slide. Now, there's some fairly complicated calculations for businesses with employees in terms of the headcount you need to maintain during the period of your loan. But for purposes of today, we're really just focusing on owner operators. You're going to hear this, I think, 3 times in this presentation, but it's important that you note that your PPP loan application is going to depend in large part on how you how you accounted for your business operations on Schedule C, in some cases Schedule F. If your first draw was in 2020, you already know this. Your 2019 Schedule C governed. If you are applying for a loan, either a first or a second draw this year, you have the option of choosing either your 2019 or your 2020 return. If the profit on that form is over $100,000, you got to reduce it to $100,000. That's your cap. If it is 0 or less, you're ineligible. But again, don't stop looking, right? There are other programs that might be applicable to you and your business. You're going to calculate a monthly net profit. That's pretty easy, right? Just divide it by 12, and then you're going to apply a multiplier. For most businesses that are not in, accommodations in the food sector, that's going to be 2.5. Depending on the dates of your loan, you're going to want to factor in your EIDL, right? Your economic injury disaster loan. For certain EIDL loans that were between January 31 of 2020 and April 3rd, you may be able to refinance that through the PPP program. In general, though, for most of you, you're going to subtract any advance you got under the EIDL program. Next slide. So the new legislation also opened up different categories of expenses. So I'm not going to go through the list of what you were allowed to spend PPP proceeds on. There's really good literature out there, and the next two speakers are going to be walking you through that a little bit as well. But we've added 4 new definitions, and it's easy enough to Google these. I'll give you just the high level summary. So a covered operations expenditure. If you've spent money now on cloud computing or HR software or certain items like that, that's now an eligible expense. And that allows you to both use it and to be forgiven for that expense as well. Covered property damage costs, that's where if you lost some property during the public disturbances last year, that's now an eligible expense. Certain supplier costs, and I think a lot of businesses are going to be looking at this one in particular for certain essential items through your supply chain, that may now be an eligible expense. And then lastly, if you bought masks and hand sanitizer and sneeze guards for your employees and obviously more expensive stuff as well, that may be an eligible expense now under the covered worker protection expenditure category. Next slide. So simple enough, don't use funds to lobby. Now, you may be able to do a little bit of that, but don't do it unless your lawyers and your financial advisors are telling you it's okay to do it. So in general, my rule is don't use any of these funds to lobby, because you wouldn't believe how many times in the legislation it tells you not to do that. Next slide. So again, record keeping. This is a government program, and although folks in just a bit are going to tell you how to get that loan forgiven, it is a loan. So it is a loan from the federal government. The federal government likes paperwork, and only businesses willing to get the paperwork compiled and retain it for 4 years should be participating in this program, right? So the government has made it easier for you, but they haven't reduced this paperwork burden. Next slide. So covered period, all I'm going to say about this is an important definition, and you're going to need to know exactly what your covered period is. In general, it was either an 8 or 24 week period that was set by law. Now it is, there's a firm origination date that starts your covered period, and you get to choose the end of your covered period as long as it's between 8 and 24 weeks. Next slide. Is another poll question.
Thank you so much, David. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got another poll question for you from David. Only large PPP loans are being audited. True or false? Okay, I don't think we fooled anybody with that one.
No, Chiquita, that was my way. Go ahead and go on to the next slide, because that was my way of, A, making sure everybody was listening, and B, yeah, that 1%, I'm sure you just hit the wrong key, because everybody knows this by now. The government has the ability to audit PPP loans of any amount. Again, this is a government loan until it is forgiven. That paperwork is important. So the next slide, let's talk about what you're getting into. So simplified forgiveness. This is a really good thing, and it's a new development, right? So for loans of $150,000 or less, there's a new streamlined application, and we're going to show you that application in a little bit. The important thing to remember is there is an EZ form, and it is easy. However, the streamlined application, the word streamlined is important because you're going to want to use that 3508S form, which is the new one for loans less than 150. And again, got to retain those records for a 4-year period. For employment records, 3 years for all other relevant information. And again, third time I'm going to say it, last time I'm going to say it, but third time, the SBA has the right and the legal authority to audit loans of any amount. So get your paperwork together and keep it in a safe place. Next slide. So second draw loans. Again, first draw. If this is your first rodeo, it's a first draw. If you haven't participated in this program before, a second draw is if you've used those proceeds appropriately, you get a second draw perhaps. They can be used for the same purposes again, but with these additional expense categories that I already told you about. They do reduce the size of a small business down to 300 employees, probably not relevant today. You do have to show your gross receipts have to show a reduction either on an annual or a quarterly basis between 2019 and 2020. We'll talk about that in just a little bit more. And there's a $2 million maximum now for the second draw loans. Next slide. Affiliation rules. So it's very technical, but if you are part of a group of companies, if you have sister companies, if you have subsidiaries, if you have parents, you need to talk to a financial or legal professional because the affiliation rules may not keep you from participating in the PPP program, but they could. So it's something you're going to need to look at. Next slide, please. Lastly, what happens? I mean, again, it's a loan. And hopefully it does get forgiven, right? But sometimes you may have to spend the money on something else. The law may change. It may not get forgiven. What happens? Well, it's still a very favorable loan. Now I say a maturity date of 2 years. That was the original maturity date under the PPP program. So some of y'all may have loans with a 2-year maturity date. Most of you are going to participate in a 5-year maturity date loan program, an interest rate of 1%. You're not going to get that anywhere else. There is no prepayment penalty. There's a deferment, but again, during that deferred period, just make sure to remember that interest is accruing and it is a loan until it's forgiven. Next slide. And I'll finish with this. Just please remember that there are penalties if you give false information. You are going to have to put your initials on a lot of lines on that form. It's a very simple form, but you're going to have to make some reps and warranties and attestations. And it's very important that you have the right facts and the right basis for those assertions that you're making. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Very good information. I appreciate it very much, as I'm sure all of our attendees do today. And now I'd like to bring on Mr. Harold Singletary, who's going to walk you through some of the process. Harold?
Thank you, Ms. Chiquita, and David, good job there. To all of our participants today, you are going to receive a lot of fact-based information. We will not be presenting false evidence appearing real during this webinar. Although some of these things may instruct fear in them, you have support. You have the MBDA, you have your banking solutions that are available to you to kind of walk you through. It is true that several small business owners were left out the first round of PPP, but now it's time to get your documents in order. Go out and research and get the correct information so that you can get the support you need to survive during these times of the pandemic. Okay, the PPP loan details. First draw, PPP loans can be used to help pay for mortgage interest, rent, utilities, protection costs related to COVID-19, uninsured property damage costs caused by looting or vandalism, and certain supply costs and expenses for operations. Of course, this can be used to retain employees and cover your payroll. The PPP loan has an interest rate of only 1%, very favorable. You will not see anywhere else where you can acquire a loan at that rate. Loans that are issued prior to June 5th, 2020 have a 2-year maturity, and those issued after June 5th, 2020 have a 5-year maturity. Next slide. Your loan payments will be deferred for borrowers who apply for loan forgiveness until SBA remits the borrower's loan amount to the lender. But you can always speak to your banker to understand the protocol. And even in the forgiveness process, your bank is going to make this easy. They've streamlined it. They have portals. It's not going to be hard document and paper. You can upload your supporting documents. So it's always good to start with your bank and the MBDA for solutions. If a borrower does not apply for a loan forgiveness, the payments are deferred 10 months after the end of that covered period for the borrower's loan forgiveness, either 8 or 24 weeks. No collateral or personal guarantees are required, nor the government or the bank will charge any small business any fees. Next slide. Applicants must have utilized the full amount of their initial draw PPP loan on or before the expected date of the second draw is dispersed. Revenue needs to have decreased at least 25% in 2020 compared to the same quarter in 2019. You can do this on an annual comparison or a quarterly comparison to find that 25% reduction. Payroll can be calculated 3 ways: 2019 calendar year, 2020 calendar year, or the last 12 months if it's in a fiscal year. If you own one or more businesses, you will be able to apply for a separate loan for each location, given each individual location is a separate legal entity. I want to say that again because several people have inquired about that, even in my accounting firm. Hey, I have 3 companies. Well, if each company has its own EIN and it's represented with its articles as a separate entity, go ahead and apply. Next slide. For loans above $150,000, applicants must submit documentation to substantiate a revenue reduction of 25% or more. That could be tax forms, profit and loss, comparison analysis, your bank statements. And if you don't have an accountant, or if you're using an accounting platform, which I hope all of my small business owners are doing, so that you can easily print out a profit and loss by quarter to show that reduction. Loans under $150,000 do not require this documentation at the time of application, but I highly recommend that you have it in order to be able to get things forgiven. Payroll documentation required in the first draw will be the same for the second draw. No additional documentation will be required for the second draw loan if the applicant used the full calendar year 2019 for their first draw. The second draw lender is the same as the first draw, and a new lender may require additional documentation. If there's anyone on the call that took the first round PPP, there is no need to change banks. Go through your initial bank lender. They will probably have a streamlined application for you to get this done quickly. Next slide.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've got our first poll question from Harold. As a sole proprietor, how do I document payments to myself during the covered period? 100% of you selected A so far.
Well, I won't add any additional value there. Thanks, Shakita, for getting that one in. And good job to all of our participants for understanding. Documentation is critical. I think David referenced that earlier in the conversation. This is how you take the fear out of applying. If you document and you follow the SBA rules and your lender instructions, this will be forgiven. Let's go to the next slide. PPP absolutes. These things are concrete, I would say. Businesses must have been affected by the coronavirus C-19. You are a self-employed individual, independent contractor, or sole proprietor with no employees at the time of the PPP loan application and did not include any employee payroll expense in the average monthly payroll calculation on the application. Understand, we're focused on the small business owner today, self-employed individuals, so other companies can apply for the PPP. This is just specific to our core attendees. You must be in operation before February 15, 2020, have to live in the United States. You must have filed Form 1040 or Schedule C for 2019, and you have to have a net profit. On this next slide, we will show you what that looks like on your Schedule C. Next slide. Find your 2019 IRS Form Schedule C, line 31. If the amount is over 100,000, like David previously mentioned, you have to cap it at 100K. If the amount is 0 or less, you will not be eligible for the PPP loan. If this amount is greater than 0, yes, you will qualify. On this next slide, we have, please go to the next slide. So all of my small business sole proprietors, single member LLC, you know what this form looks like. It's in your 1040 tax return, the Schedule C. And on the left, they have a 0 balance. And if it's a negative, obviously you will not qualify. On the right, we show a positive net income of 5,000. David also previously referenced, you'll divide that net income amount by 12 to get your monthly amount, multiplied times the multiplier, which will be in most of your cases 2.5, unless you're in hospitality. Next slide. How do I apply? Well, you have a great chance to speak with Optus Bank on the call, presenting today. And I'm excited that they're here. I've worked and referred several clients, and they have done an amazing job in our community supporting small business owners. But the SBA is currently accepting first draw PPP loan apps from participating lenders. All new first draw PPP loans will have the same terms regardless of the lender or borrower. So you don't have to bounce around trying to see if someone's giving you a different rate. If you are uncertain of the procedures or do not have an accountant, assistance can be provided to you to help with the application process. One, directly with the bank, but of course, by our community partner, MBDA. At the end of this presentation, I'm sure they will give you information on how to contact them for such support. Next slide. This is an example of the application, the borrower application that was revised as of January 8, 2021. Just to touch on a few points on this, you can see in the first box is basically checking what type of entity you are, your DBA, the year you were established, business legal name, the NICS code, which tells which industry you are in, and then the SBA qualifiers on the employees in your organization. Business address, EIN, contact information, and then in the next section is where you would take that net income from your Schedule C, divide by 12, multiply times the multiplier, and come up with the amount you will qualify for the PPP. In the box for the purpose of the loan, you don't have to limit yourself to one. Who knows what tomorrow brings, but we want to make sure that in this process, you do what you need to do for it to be forgiven. There are several boxes and questions. David, as an attorney, has referenced 3 times. Here's my time to add one more. Please do not provide any false information. Work with your bank, work with the MBDA, reach out to your accountant. Understand you are signing a document that will, can help you now, but can hurt you later if you falsify information. The second page of this PPP is similar. You read between the fine print. They're all straightforward. Correctly respond, and let's go get you some PPP funds. Next slide. When is the deadline to apply? March 31st. I turned around and January was gone. I'm in the tax vortex, so March 31st will be here quickly. Do not hesitate to reach out for support. Next slide.
Okay, Harold, we've got one final poll question for you. I have 3 separate businesses. One loan forgiveness application will cover all 3 of them. True or false? I think they're listening. That's correct.
Good deal.
99% false. We've got one loan holdout with true.
Yeah, we're going to say that's technical issues on the button. Next slide. Yes. Oh my God, your loan is forgivable. Do what you need to do to support the documentation to meet the criteria, and yes, it will be forgiven. The SBA will forgive loans if all employees' retention criteria are met and the funds are used for eligible expenses. Understand those protocols. A borrower can apply for forgiveness once all loan proceeds for which the borrower is requesting forgiveness has been used. Borrowers can apply for forgiveness anytime up to the maturity date of the loan. If borrowers do not apply for forgiveness within 10 months after the last day of the covered period, then PPP loan payments are no longer deferred, and borrowers will begin making loan payments to their PPP lender. There is no excuse to understand the parameters and the criteria to be, but utilize your resources, like I said, to make sure all of your things are in order so that you can get this money to support your companies during this trying time. Next slide. What form do I use to apply? You can apply for forgiveness of your first or second draw PPP loan using the SBA form 3508S, only if the loan amount you received from your lender was $150,000 or less. For an individual first or second draw PPP loan, if you are not eligible to use this form, you may apply for forgiveness of your PPP loan using SBA form 3508 or 3508EZ. Each loan must use a separate loan forgiveness application form. And from my poll question, you will all understand that. Next slide, please. You can apply, here we go. For loans of 150K or less, complete the PPP loan forgiveness application form 3508S, a one-page application for borrowers that received a loan of 150,000 or less, information about the borrower's loan amount, disbursement date, employee totals, covered period dates, and the amount of the loan spent on payroll, which forgiveness is requested. Borrowers are not required to submit any supporting documentation with the application, but are mandated to maintain payroll, non-payroll, and other documents that could be requested during the SBA loan review audit. As you would keep a file for taxes, I recommend that you do the same for your PPP loan application. Okay, next slide. This is an example of the forgiveness form 3508S. Pretty straightforward. This document may look difficult to read or process in the hard form, but majority of the banks have a portal that asks you direct questions that you will be able to go through a click of a button. It will submit the information, get you to electronically sign, and you move forward. You have resources at your fingertips with the MBDA and with your lender. Free service to you. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Harold. Appreciate it. A lot of good information. I hope you guys are taking notes. Thank you so very much, Harold. And now I'd like to bring on Dr. Brenda Brannick. She is the PPP coordinator with Optus Bank. Good afternoon, Brenda.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I had to put my glasses on so I can hear, right? Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. Welcome to the panelists. Welcome to our participants. Thank you to the panelists. You guys did an awesome job. So you made my jobs very easy. I appreciate it. Just want to talk to you a little bit about the PPP application process and Optus Bank. And yes, there are several other banks that you could apply with, but I am here representing Optus Bank and want to let you know that it is an absolutely easy process. Next slide, please. So why Optus Bank? Optus Bank cares because we're a mission-driven, we're a minority-owned bank, and we know that there are a lot of minority-owned businesses out there, and we're happy to help you. We want to do everything that we can to help you to make this process as smooth as possible. Next slide.
Okay.
We have a poll question right off the bat, right?
Yep, gonna kick it off with a poll question for Brenda. Did you receive proceeds from the Paycheck Protection Program in 2020? Yes, I did. No, because I didn't know how to apply, or no, because I didn't think I would qualify. Wow, 48%
Wow.
no, because I didn't think I would qualify.
Wow. And so we realized that, and I didn't think it was that high, 48%, that's high. We didn't think that it was that high, that many people didn't know how to qualify, didn't know that they would qualify. And we actually heard some rumors that many people were told that they didn't qualify when they actually did qualify. Because it's like, I'm a 1099, I only get 1099s, so there's no need for me to apply, but you're exactly who should apply. Next slide, please. We're thinking that the information that you've received today will definitely help you with everything that you need to know that you are indeed eligible to apply. So for sole proprietor, you know, we look at our hairstylists, our photographers, our any sole proprietor, any single business, you know, many of you did not apply, but you're definitely qualified to apply. So you need your 2019 or your 2020 Schedule C, your 1099 miscellaneous, anything that you need to support your income, your payroll journals. If you have employees and you file 940s and 941s, you'll need those. If you applied with the Secretary of State's office, you'll need your articles of organization, the front and back copy of your driver's license, or if there are multiple account signers, then the front and back copy of the driver's license of all of your multiple account signers. And then your KYC is Know Your Customer, is a business questionnaire that Optus requires. So if you want to apply with Optus, those are the things that you will need. It's really, really simple. Next slide, please. Second draw. If you already applied and you applied with Optus, the only thing that you need to do is have proof of your revenue reduction of 25% or more. If last year was a great year for you and you actually did not have a reduction in revenue, then you don't qualify for the second draw. If you had a reduction, you do qualify and you should apply. You'll have to sign your financial documents because you're going to attest that this information is accurate. I am attesting to the SBA that yes, this information is correct, and I would like to get the money. If you have the same lender for the first draw, and you don't have to, but if you do, then it's easy, especially with Optus. It's easy because we can send you a link and it pre-populates most of the information, so it makes your process that much easier. If you go to a different lender, then you will need to provide them with all of the other information that you provided the first time you applied. But still, it's a simple process and you should definitely apply. Next slide. So the documentation required for the second draw, as I previously stated, if you are going to the same lender, the only thing that you need to apply is your 25% proof of gross income. It's not your net, it's your gross revenue. So make sure you keep that in mind. But you want to use your calendar year 2019 figures to determine the first draw loan amount, and then you'll use your 2019 figures to determine your second draw amount, and you're going to have your show proof of that 25% or more gross revenue reduction. You want to make sure that you submit adequate documentation to say you had a reduction. And it's okay if you, I know our friend Harold Singletary said, please, I hope that you're using an accountant. And if you didn't use an accountant, it's okay. That doesn't preclude you from qualifying. You will still need to provide something that shows that you had a 25% reduction in gross revenue. So you can type up a profit and loss statement yourself, and you can use it by quarter, or you can use it by for the entire year. So if the last time you received the PPP loan, if the last time you received it, you use your Schedule C, and that was for the entire year, then you can use your Schedule C again. If you want to just look at one quarter, then you can look at, you have to compare quarter to quarter though. So you can't say, okay, I'm going to use my second quarter of 2019 compared to my fourth quarter of 2020. Whatever quarter you use for 2019 should be the same quarter for 2020. Next slide, please. So this is what the Optus program looks like, the application. When you go in, you see at the top of the screen it has several sections. The business section, personal information and so on. As you complete a section, you will get like a dark red bar under that section. And when the section has not been completed, it's like a bright red. My favorite color is red too. It's a bright red. So you can see that information is really simple information, but again, a lot of it will be pre-populated if you receive a link because you used Optus Bank the previous time. Next slide. Next slide. Here is just showing you that this is information that needs to be completed. The purpose of the loan amount. At the bottom of this, it shows you if it doesn't need to be collateralized, but who the borrower is, who the business is, and you will notice that several of these prompters have asterisks. If there's an asterisk, that means it's required information, and your application will not be considered complete unless all of the required fields are completed. Next slide, please. It shows you documents, and here you see it's your articles of incorporation or organization. If you filed with the Secretary of State, your tax returns. If it's a second draw, then it'll also say 25% reduction or substantiation of 25% reduction in revenue. Next slide. And then when you finish, you get the congratulations, and you may submit your application. And sometimes what I've seen, sometimes our applicants are so excited that they receive the congratulations, they forget to hit submit. But you have to submit it. And once you submit it, then, you know, Optus will contact you to let you know that we received it, we're working on it, and so on. If you did not submit it, if you forgot to submit it, we will contact you to say, hey, we have an application here for you. It's incomplete. Is it your intention to complete the application? Is there something we can help you to do to complete it? Or do you want to withdraw it because you have lending from another source? Next slide. So how can you have a successful application process? I'm glad you asked. Very good question. Read carefully. Read the guidelines carefully. You've received a lot of information today. David and Harold have done an excellent job giving you information on what's required. Please, 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 please. You've heard it once, you've heard it twice, and third time's a charm. Don't submit false documentation. You're assigning, you're attesting to this information, and it may help you now, but at the end, SBA can audit, they probably will audit, and you know, that's a bad day. So let's not do that. Please make sure that you gather all the required information, because you're going to be able to see that the required information is, I've seen where people have submitted, you know, hey, I get all of my payments through Cash App or PayPal. They've submitted that, and they've shown the reduction in gross revenue by submitting that. But submit all of your required documentation. Respond to any inquiries, because if there's something that we don't have that we need, we can't process your application timely. There are self-help resources on the Optus PPP.com or SBA.gov. Those self-help tools can really answer the questions. They help you with calculations. Sometimes it can get a little tricky with the 940s and the 941s. It can get a little tricky, but there are tools that can help you, and we have DESA to help you as well. Please allow approximately 7 to 10 business days for processing. Next slide. Thank you very much on behalf of Dom and the team at Optus Bank. We really and truly welcome your business. We anticipate greatness, and I'll turn it back over to Ms. Jones.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I appreciate it. To all of our presenters, lots of great information. And we do have some questions, and we've got some time. We would like to address all of the questions that we are now receiving. If you do have a question that you found was not answered during the course of the webinar, please feel free to submit it into the Q&A box now, and we will address these one at a time. Our first question comes from Gregory regarding a shuttered grant. I host sporting events in the Southeast, and due to COVID, my event was canceled. Can I apply?
So, Chiquita, I sent Gregory a link. There is a really good resource at the SBA website on the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. It's complicated, but they do have a pretty good who can apply, what's the amount, and then you'll just have to weigh that against the pros and cons of applying for that versus the PPP program. I would run the numbers for both and see what works better for you.
I'm concurring with David there, Chiquita, that look at the options. Even if you didn't apply for the disaster loan or the grant that was attached to the disaster loan, there are several other options out there to find some funding for your business, but you have to make that decision on what's best for you.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Tracy. You all may have addressed it directly, but I'll just read it at large for the group in case someone else has a question. My Schedule C on line 31 is negative $18,000. Am I not eligible?
No, ma'am, you are not. I'm sorry. You have to have
Okay.
positive net income on your Schedule C.
Okay. All righty. And as we go here to our question and answer box, what if an employee gets COVID and cannot work? Do you count that person at the time of forgiveness?
So I'll take that. This is going to be a little bit outside of the scope of this particular presentation, but there are rules regarding the timing. So when we talked about the covered period, you are measuring that covered period against another period. And so whether a particular employee is working during that period or not working, if you hired other people, it's not a zero-sum game. It is, and it can be a little complicated. So if you've got specific questions, I would for sure go into the MBDA folks and talk to them. If they can't figure it out, or want me to help out, I'd be happy to opine as well. But businesses that have employees have more hoops to jump through than what we're talking about today.
Thank you, David. Our next question comes from Kimberly. Would COVID grants received during the pandemic be included in the revenue to determine the 25% gross revenue reduction?
I don't think I understand the question.
Let me
Repeat it, please. I'm sorry.
certainly. Would COVID grants received during the pandemic be included in the revenue to determine the 25% gross revenue reduction?
I'll take that one. I've instructed all of my clients, even with the round one PPP, to not include that in your gross sales, but you put that in other income. That way, when you're factoring true service or deliverable sales, you have a true comparison, because the PPP, if done right, will be forgiven, but it is deductible against your operational expenses that you used it for. And any additional grants, it is considered other income. It's not your service or your product revenue. So it should be in a different segment of your profit and loss. And what I was saying earlier, all of you should be using an accounting platform. And I understand a small business owner, but for you to grow your business, that's where it starts. You need to be looking at profit and losses, but that allocation would be in the other income section.
Great, thank you very much, Harold. What if an employee, oh, we've done that, I'm sorry. What if I didn't make enough to file?
If you have a zero or negative amount, you do not qualify. But as David said, that there may be other avenues that you can approach, but not PPP.
So yeah, I agree. The one caveat is, so if you haven't done your taxes for 2020 yet, and we keep talking about, well, you need to check your 2020 Schedule C, fill it out. And maybe your overall tax burden, maybe you've got some losses someplace else and you don't have to file those 1040 someday, but you're still going to have to give a copy of that draft Schedule C to Dr. Brannick and her team, and you're going to have to be able to back that up.
Great, thank you. And from Lisa, what kind of proof can I submit to show losses?
To show losses?
Yes.
A reduction in gross revenue? You think that's what it is? Reduction in gross revenue?
Yes.
Probably, okay. So as I stated, anything you can, if you have your bank statements, if you have your Schedule C, as David just mentioned, you can compare Schedule C to Schedule C, or if you want to compare it by quarter, you can do a profit and loss statement, as Harold has spoken about a couple of times. And if you want to do it by quarter, remember, it must be quarter for quarter. So second quarter to second quarter or fourth quarter, whichever quarter you want to compare it to in 2019, you can use that, compare it in 2020. But it could be your Cash App receipts, it can be your PayPal, it can be if you're paying yourself a salary and you actually write yourself, I'm sorry, if you have bank statements and it shows where everything goes into your bank statements. But the simplest way to do it is a profit and loss statement. And you could do that yourself if you haven't done it, but the best way to do it, back to my friend Harold, is to have an accountant do it for you.
Thank you so much, Brenda.
You're welcome.
From Phyllis, if you applied for an SBA loan, can you apply for PPP?
Yes, two separate things.
Short and sweet, thank you. Our next question, is the 3508 forgiveness form available yet? My bank doesn't seem to have it, and I have not been able to apply for forgiveness.
Oh, woe is me. I mean, that's kind of, I wouldn't say a new thing. It's an ongoing update. You know, banks are working hard to get the funding out, and the same with the forgiveness. Do not let the forgiveness portal stop you from applying. They will help you work through this process. If your bank, your lender hasn't stressed you about the forgiveness, move forward so that you can be in line for round 2. They will get that portal up. You keep your documents in order and on file. It will be forgiven. Keep moving forward. Let's fail forward. Even with the banks trying to kind of get people funding, they have to work as diligent to get their systems up as well.
And it's important to note, you've got up to 6 months to submit your forgiveness paperwork. And so don't panic. You know, again, the banks are building this out for the first time ever at the same time that these regulations are coming out, and we're just kind of all in on this together. The one thing I would say, if you're a small business and you want to get bigger, one of the great ways to do that is to get to know your banker. So instead of just checking a website from time to time, you should have, you know, it's the old adage, right? Do you go through the drive-through to deposit your checks, or do you go in the bank and say hi to Phyllis every time and you know, get to know your banker? That's key. And that's important in this process, just like any other process. And so, you know, you ought to have a person that you can email or call. Don't bug them too much, because again, they're building this airplane while we're flying together as well. But, you know, that relationship is going to be critical to your business.
Great, thank you. Marie wanted to know how long it takes to hear back from the lender.
I'll take that one. Thank you. That's a great question. So it could take from the time you submit your application to the time you hear, and if everything is good, it may be 7 to 10 days. So that means that it has gone to the lender, you've completed your application, all of your documents are good. We don't have to contact you for anything because you forgot something. So it goes through a quality control, it goes through compliance, it goes through bank security, and they do that. That's just a security measure to make sure that the bank is protected, that we're not trying to process a loan for a company or entity that is not qualified. And then it goes to SBA. SBA has to review it and make sure that it's a loan that they want to fund. We hear back from SBA. It comes back to the bank. The bank has to send it to their lending department to issue your check, and you'll get the check in the mail. So if you have not heard anything in 7 to 10 days, it's okay to reach out and say, hey, is there something wrong? Did you all miss my application? But if your application is complete and it's on file, the application wasn't missed, they may just be running behind. So I would say wait at least 7 to 10 days before you contact the bank to say, hey, is everything okay? I haven't heard anything from you.
Great. Brenda, I think this one is for you as well.
Okay.
It says, Dr. Brannick is saying reduction in gross revenue. I thought if you don't have net profit in 2019, you were not eligible.
That is correct. So if you weren't able to apply in 2019, you wouldn't be a second draw. The only way that you would have a 25% reduction in revenue is if you were a first draw and this is your second draw. That is correct.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Tina. Can I use my payroll taxes 940 for the last 3 quarters? I only have 1 employee and about 20 1099 workers. How can I apply?
That 1 employee is the only one who will be eligible under your business. The 1099, and that's a beautiful question. The 1099 is for the employees who receive the 1099, not for the employer who issued the 1099.
Anybody want to add or elaborate before we move on?
No, I think Ms. Brenda handled that well, but the employee is your employee, so they should be factored in your wage number. The contractors, as we have probably several contractors on this webinar, should be applying for themselves directly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was an important change when the CARE Act came out. At one point in time, we were all hopeful that 1099s would be included with the W-2s, but they are not. So what you should do to be responsible is to tell your 1099 folks, hey, you know, whether you think of it this way or not, dear 1099 worker, you've got a business and you ought to be going to the MBDA and asking if you're eligible for the PPP program.
Great, thank you. Our next question, can you apply with only a completed Schedule C if you have not done the rest of your 2020 taxes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's now it's February. It's crazy that it's already February, but yes, absolutely. Many people have not filed their taxes yet. So it's absolutely okay for you to apply. And I think David actually mentioned it. Go ahead and fill it out and submit it. And that is what you're going to use to determine either your gross revenue or your eligibility amount.
Right, thank you. Catherine says, we are a 501c3 church. Can we apply? We don't file taxes.
The only way that the church could apply is if the church has employees. Many pastors are not employees, they're 1099, they're not salaried, but churches do have employees. So if your church has employees, W-2 employees, you can apply.
Thank you. I've been a 1099 worker for a while. My question is, when do I put I started my business? Is it from the very beginning of last year? Or excuse me, is it from the very beginning or last year?
So if you're a 1099 employee, you didn't register for a tax ID number or register as a single member LLC, articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State, you utilize your tax return. When did you first recognize that 1099 in your tax return reporting that independent income? Which should be easy if you have it on file, or go back to your preparer for solutions to show, because that 1099 would have shown up on a Schedule C in the year of your filing from the beginning of time.
Great, thank you. I drive an 18-wheeler and lost business to COVID-19 related repairs to my truck. Thus, I lost income. Can I apply?
It's not just on the fact that you lost income to the COVID-19, but some of the other factors. You're a truck driver, you get 1099. You're going to report that on your tax return. As long as we're showing positive income, first time applier. If you didn't go first round, that's what's going to dictate. It's not the repairs. We all were affected by COVID-19, but the numbers drive the picture in the application. So let's start there. Start with your Schedule C net income. Check that box first. All of the others should fall in line and you should be able to go forward.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, to reinforce what Harold just said, I think we need to go back. There's 2 things that we really didn't emphasize that was part of the original CARES program. This is called the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, right? The goal of this is not to make everybody whole because of COVID. The goal of this program is to protect paychecks during the coronavirus. And secondly, the point that we did make before is there's a 60-40 rule. And that 60-40 rule is important. So 60% of what you're seeking to get forgiven must be for payroll and payroll related expenses. Those other things that I talked about, the sneeze guards for your employees, that's capped at 40% for your forgiveness application. And that 60-40 rule extends, that's not new. That extends all the way back to PPP loans from their inception.
Great, thank you. And David says, if you have a combination of W-2 employees and 1099s, will the 1099 expenses count towards your payroll reports? And do businesses that only have 1099 subs qualify for a loan? So it's kind of a two-part question.
I heard that first part. What was the second part, Chiquita?
The second part was, do businesses that only have 1099 subcontractors qualify for a loan?
Again, I think we addressed that earlier. The contractors have to stand alone on their own. If you have W-2 employees, you can factor that, but it's your business, so the net income relates to you, especially if you're not paying yourself on a W-2. We want a positive bottom line so that you can apply for the PPP.
Right. And another question on a church, and then we'll move on. It says, just a quick question on churches. If eligible, what tax documents would be required since churches are not required to file taxes?
You can use your payroll wage reports. You still should be able to produce a profit and loss, but it's around, as David referenced earlier, payroll protection program. So it is to support retaining employees to cover payroll through this time with some additional percentages for, operational costs. But it's, not having a 1040 Schedule C or, 1065 return, you would then utilize your profit and loss statements, and Ms. Brenda with Optus or MBDA could help you with positioning what documents will get you the verification.
Thank you. A lot of churches represented today. It says we pay our employees via 1099 as a church, but we have a mortgage, utilities, other expenses. Would we qualify for PPP money?
No, they would not qualify for PPP money. But David and Harold, I think, actually mentioned that there are other programs that may be able to assist them, but not because it is the paycheck protection. So no, they would not qualify for PPP.
Okay. Can I reapply somewhere else if I've already applied for the second round of PPP?
Why?
You can reapply, but we would really rather that you not. And the reason that we say we would rather that you not is because it takes man hours to process your application. But it is absolutely up to you if you want to go to another lender. SBA will not fund you twice because everybody has the same process. So we all have to go through SBA, submit it, and SBA will take time to review your loan. So you don't want to slow SBA down either with reviewing loans that they've already reviewed or reviewing applications they've already reviewed, because they're not going to fund you twice.
Great, thank you. Can you use net revenue from other years besides 2019?
No, this is a 2019 factor, 2020. They're not going to go to 2018, 2017 before the pandemic. This is all CARES Act related to the pandemic. So the prior year was 19 to show the effect of what the pandemic did to your business in 2020. But I have not seen in all the application I submitted the ability to go back in prior years other than 19 and 20.
Okay, great. It says, I am a real estate agent that had a reduction in income in 2020. Can I qualify, but I do file joint returns with my husband?
The joint return with your husband is fine. The question for you is if the 25% reduction does not account for people going after the first round. So take the 25% reduction out of your mind and focus. If you did not apply for PPP round one, those factors are based on your Schedule C and your net income. That's it.
Great, thank you. Do you have to pay taxes on grant money?
The grant funds that you are given is still going to be listed as other income. There are other deductions that could factor there, but we have to look at the parameters of the grant. But yes, it's going to still be reported in income.
Great. If you started your business prior to February 2020, but do not have a quarter in 2019 to compare for proof of loss, would one qualify for PPP?
So again, to Harold's point, so there's two things going on here, right? There is that for people that have never applied for a PPP loan, they're in the first draw category. And the first draw category, all we're looking at is, are you a qualifying business? Doesn't matter the loss, right? That's not applicable. That is only applicable if you're going for a second draw. And so, and then, yeah, I'm not sure about that former question, but if what they're asking for is PPP, is the PPP loan proceeds taxable? That is not taxable income. And that was clarified, not immediately, but it was clarified for sure in December of last year.
Great, thank you. I am a sole proprietor business and the business is in my name and I filed taxes. Can I still apply?
Yes, you may apply. As long as you can substantiate your income. Well, actually, yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, great. I started a new salon in January 2020, and the salon closed down from COVID-19 of June 2020. Do you qualify for PPP?
So nothing in 2019?
No, the salon was started in January 2020 and closed down in June of 2020.
You have to still be in business as a factor of qualification. It can't be a closed business trying to get a PPP loan.
Okay, great. Do I use the 3508S to apply for a loan under $100,000?
Is that the forgiveness?
Forgiveness.
No, yeah, not to apply. That's
Yeah,
a forgiveness application.
Okay. If I was awarded a grant from SMBDA, will this PPP application be considered as a first draw?
Yes. PPP is SBA specific, lender specific. There are several grants that were going on in the state of South Carolina and nationally for as support. And so this is not on the same line. You have to just meet the criteria for the PPP through your bank and your lending institution for the qualification.
Okay, thank you. What if I have an S Corp and file a Schedule E, not Schedule C?
The bank will stay, so you have an S Corp, you have employees, correct? And so you will have to meet the SBA employee retention. I think this webinar was specific to small business owners, but yes, you can still qualify to go after PPP as long as you meet the employee threshold number and income and wage supporting documentation. Those things don't hold you from applying. 1120 S Corp, C Corps, partnerships, etc.
Okay. I started a decorating business which had gained traction in early 2019, but lost business in 2020 because of COVID. I'm not sure how I would be eligible to apply for PPP.
I think the question is, I'm not sure I will be eligible because you don't necessarily have documentation to show the business that you think you lost. You don't have to have documentation to prove what you think you lost. Your documentation should show a reduction in gross revenue from 2019 to 2020. So if you had a reduction in revenue because you lost business, you just need to, if you file a Schedule C, whatever it is, however you file your taxes, you'll need to provide that information and show that you experienced, if you are a second draw, and a lot of, I think it was 43%, 48%. Ms. Jones, I don't remember, that said that they didn't think that they were eligible.
48%.
48% said they did not apply because they didn't think they were eligible. But you can apply and you should apply.
Okay. And is the loan forgiveness taxable?
I think
we just talked on that, David. It's not taxable.
Okay, I completed the application and did the lender match, but I wasn't matched with any lenders. Is there anything else I can do? I drive for Uber.
They said they did the loan application without a lender match. Where did they apply? Did they go direct to one of like a Cabbage or a Square? I know they were doing it, but I recommend you dealing with a bank institution. If you don't have a lender, you're in luck because Ms. Brenda is on the call. She did post it opt information. I'm sure MBDA will also, post this, which will have contact information for resources. Everyone on the call should be applying or verifying if they qualify.
Okay.
It's worth mentioning, yes, there is a resource at sba.gov. And it seems like the person asking the question has actually accessed that to no avail, but in general, that is an available resource. But honestly, Uber driver or whomever, if they've got a checking account, they ought to be going to that bank first. Dance with the one who brung you. They have already done some of the red flag checks. They've already done their KYC, their know your customer to some extent, right? That's where, and again, if you've got I think Harold said this best, if you've got a first draw, stick with the same folks, unless there's a real problem there, stick with the same folks for the second draw. If you already have a banking relationship, unless that bank's just not participating, and some aren't doing a very good job with this, but most are, wherever you bank, that's where you should start.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the conclusion of our question and answer session, because a lot of our questions are basically revolving around the same thing. And of course, we do have information for you on the slide that is on your screen. If you need additional PPP assistance, questions that revolve around whether you qualify for PPP, how you get started, can your loan be forgiven, you can certainly visit either of these two links to sign up for free assistance. And please, I do want to emphasize that this is at no cost to you. You can sign up for free one-on-one assistance over the phone, or you can schedule an appointment to actually speak with a person face-to-face. So you have two options available to you here. We had several questions as to whether or not this webinar would be available, and it will be. All of our participants will be sent, excuse me, a PDF version of today's presentation, and it will include links to documents that were referenced today. And hopefully all of your questions have been addressed and will be addressed through the one-on-one process. On behalf of the South Carolina Minority Business Development Agency Business Center, our sponsors and community partners, I would like to thank you all for participating in today's webinar. We certainly hope that you found this information useful as you go through the PPP process. Again, I thank you to all of our sponsors and partners, and especially to you for participating. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you.